the very first episode of Australian Survivor Desktop. My name is Jack. I am living over in Ireland at the moment, watching Australian Survivor from afar, and it is driving me mad that I don't have people to watch the show with and chat about it with. Messenger just isn't doing it for me. I need to get my thoughts out, and that's what we're doing right here. I don't know if you guys feel similarly, but this show, this season of Survivor has been one of the most frustrating I've watched. I'm loving it. It's fantastic. It's addictive. But the gameplay and the strategy is so poor, it's driving me insane. And I think last night's episode was a perfect example of why or how misguided they all are in playing it. So I want to dive into what happened last night. Hopefully I'm going to do this after every episode just to get everything on my chest, feel better about myself, and hopefully we're going to have a really good discussion about Survivor, what these guys should be doing and where and why they're going so wrong. So, the vote last night, Gerald goes home, makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. So, George was the orchestrator of this, as he is the orchestrator of everything that's stupid. George is a merchant of chaos. He struggles to think more than 30 seconds ahead. His primary objective is to be involved and to be active. I think he's one of those people that confuses activity with productivity or activity with efficiency. He truly is the cockroach from Bankstown. So George last night he's faced with a proposition. He's been playing the middle, which should never have been allowed to happen. People continuously allow George to be this little worm, but whatever, we'll talk about that later. He's playing the middle and he has a choice. He can either choose to get Emmett out or he can choose to get Danny out. Now, at this point in the game, given Haley's slip up recently, Emmett and Danny are the two favourites to win it all. I believe, at least. Emmett is by far and away the best physical threat. If I had to, I would bet that Emmett wins every immunity challenge from here on out. I think that's a better than 50% chance that he wins all those. So you may get one chance to get this guy out of the game. On the other hand, you got Danny, who orchestrated the Simon blindside, which was probably the best move of the series so far. He went home with 2 idols. Danny's been calling the shots on all the stuff. So she's already got the makings of a winning resume. The bulk of it is there. You know, if she coasted from here, she could just say, well, once I'd made those moves, I lay low. So Danny's a real threat to win it all. So he's got 2 options. Yet George decides to come up with a third option. And the third option is, let's get out Gerald, who's done nothing in this game, poses no threat, and is going to be somebody's GOAT to the end. And I hope that the jury see through George's bullshit if he gets out of the end. I really want George out. I'm so sick of George. I've been sick of him since day one. He just does dumb stuff. If George gets to the end and he's sitting next to Emmett or sitting next to Danny, I truly hope they ask him, why should we vote for you when you had a chance to get rid of one of these guys? Because why should they? He's not going to win. He's not going to win challenges, George. And I think that as the group gets smaller and smaller, I think that his strategy is going to become less and less efficient or effective. It's not efficient at all, effective. Because he's eventually going to be he's going to be collateral damage to his own madness. So rather than deciding, you know what, Flick's going to play her idol on Emmett, we flush the idol, we're going to get rid of Danny. This is great. You know, I could live with that. That's fine. You don't want to overplay your hand and try and force Emmett out when you know that there's going to be an idol played on him. But there was really no read to go to the brains. Like the brains were just glad they're not in the firing range here. They're not doing anything. Haley, who's the only one who's proactive in that group, the only one who's got any chance of making any noise, is just glad to be back in the show for now. So I give her a pass here for just surviving. So George just overplayed his hand here. There was no reason to go after Gerald. This was so dumb, and we'll talk about what happens next afterwards. But I think that, well, in fact, we'll talk about it now. So what happens now? Like, George's cover is completely blown, right? Like, if George voted, if George had voted with the others, got the others to vote for Danny, and they all got it Danny, George is still attached to Emmett, Flick, and Gerald, right? But now Emmett is pissed off that they got rid of. So he's lost his connection. Yes, he's gone. You know what? I go into this brains alliance of six now that runs the show. But Haley is not going to have a huge amount of patience for George, and Wei doesn't either. Andrew's a weird case, so it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, because I don't think George is in a strong position at all now. I think that George has now put himself from, sort of under the radar, able to pull strings, to now putting himself at the bottom with no chance of flipping over. And in fact, I can very easily see Haley organising some sort of vote to get rid of George, especially if Emmett and Danny aren't options. So I think George has put himself in an alliance that gets him through until they get rid of Danny or whatever, but I don't think he's set himself up for long-term success. I don't think anyone in the brains really trusts him. No one in the brawn really trusts him, but at least if he'd gone with the flow and got Danny out, he'd still have Cara, Emmett, Gerald, and Flick on his team. And if he told the others to vote for Danny as well, he'd have the brains. He'd still be in the middle of this tribe rather than now being on the bottom of an alliance. So again, I think George is the epitome of the bad gameplay in this show. Flick, I didn't like the way Flick played this at all either. First thing being that Flick decided that she was not going to get Emmett out. So I don't mind necessarily going for Danny. I can live with that. Like, you've got two big threats there. Maybe Flick feels as though she's going to be a bit more different to Emmett than she would be to Danny. I get Danny out. I've got my idol to play later on. This is starting to build my resume. I've got rid of one of the big players. So I can buy into that. That's fine. I do think the primary strategy at this point in the game has to be get out challenge. Well, it's alliances first, but then get out challenge threats. Like, you get Emmett out when you get the chance, because you may not get another chance. And if Emmett gets to the end with a Cara, with a Wei, at this stage with a Laura, with a Flick, he's going to win. So, and if he keeps winning the way through, they're going to have to pick people off eventually. So he's in a really strong position now if he can keep winning those challenges. So I would have preferred for her to go along with Danny, but at the end of the day, I don't mind her going against Danny. What I do mind is then why she's played her idol. It makes absolute... Actually, I'll rewind a tiny bit. One of my favourite moments of this episode was when she told Emmett what was going on, and Gerald was there, and Gerald had this look of confusion on his face, but then sort of it sunk in that he just does whatever Flick says. So she didn't need to consult with him initially because it's just one-way traffic. And they seem to have developed some level of intimacy, but it's all one way. The weird foot massage in the water was creepy. So I think that Flick probably isn't getting enough credit for turning Gerald into her version of Cara. But now he's gone, so it doesn't really matter anymore. So there was no reason for her to play her idol. She had Emmett, Gerald, herself, three. I guess at this point, the problem is if she doesn't trust George to have the others vote Danny. But the first thing she should have done is go to George and say, we need to get the others to vote Danny. So I think she assumed, from what you see in the show, that she assumed she had herself, Gerald, Emmett, George, Cara being 5, right? And then the worry, I guess, is that if Danny votes Emmett, which they wanted her to, and then the other 5 vote Emmett, then you end up... the other 4 vote Emmett, you end up losing out there. So, but still, I think that it just wouldn't have been too difficult to get the others to buy into voting on Danny and getting Danny out without having to lose your idol. And even if you don't play your idol and Emmett does still go, then it's still okay because you've still got an idol and you've got one of the biggest threats in the game out. So I thought that she played that really poorly. And I mean, she hasn't been a big game player. She's done this loyalty stuff over and over, which is fine, but it keeps getting her into trouble. So, it was frustrating there. Haley, I give her a pass for not making any moves because she just wanted to stay in the game this time around. She didn't need to get too carried away with doing anything. She was just going to do what she was told, and that was fine. The other brains are non-factors in the show, so there's nothing really happening there. Kara's just George's sycophant now. So obviously the thing that precipitated this was Danny's breaking of the alliance. Now, I think that Danny this is again the thing, like these players think they think they're smart, they think they're big players, but they're not. And that's the frustrating part. So Danny obviously got, like, you could see her sidled up on the wall there, like, oh yeah, like let's get someone out. It's like she needed to have way more sort of subtlety and way more strategy with how she goes about that. I think that she probably could have orchestrated an Emmett vote out by, rather than recruiting Flick and Gerald, recruiting the brains. So she'd gone and got Haley, Andrew, Way, Laura. Surely there's more than 3 of them. Oh, George, Kara. If she'd gone and got those guys, that's 6, to vote Emmett out, I think it would have been fine, right? Like, so I rather than going to her alliance members and getting an alliance member to turn, I probably would have tried to get the others to turn, and that way she would have even had plausible deniability, possibly even voted herself for Emmett. Voted herself for one of the others and had it as a 4-5 split, and then she could have maintained her own integrity with her alliance, saying, oh, well, I voted for, like, let's get Haley out. I voted for Haley. Then the other 5 of them all voted for Emmett, and all of a sudden Emmett's gone. So I think that she needed to be way more subtle with that. She didn't understand Flick's personality or needs whatsoever. George was never going to fight. Gerald was never going to fight back. So that's what happened there. So the next episode, so what can we expect here? Well, as I said, like, George is probably now going to find himself at the bottom. We've got Flick, Emmett, and Danny. Emmett and Flick will obviously stay tight. Danny is now in no man's land, and I guess is the primary target for the next group. I can see Emmett and Flick joining up with the brains to get Danny out if Danny doesn't win this immunity challenge. That would make the most sense to me. As I said, George and Kara probably find themselves on the bottom. Haley, it's going to be hard to... It's hard to read where she fits in now. I don't know if she's can sort of work her way back into the brains tribe, whether she's at the bottom of that, whether she starts working with... I think that she's just going to have to play it cool for a couple of episodes and work her way back in, I suppose. There's really not much to be gained by working with Danny or working with Emmett and Flick, unless Emmett and Flick are working with the brains to get Danny out. So my expectation on the next episode is that as long as Danny loses immunity, which I assume she will, is that the group goes after her next. She's the natural outsider now, which makes it an easy vote. So we'll see what happens there. So I'm really looking forward to the next episode. Hopefully you found this somewhat entertaining and enjoyable. If you've probably found the season as frustrating as I have, but equally engrossing through their lack of strategy. So this is Australian Survivor Desktop. Looking forward to chatting after tomorrow's episode.